think Google Meet is recording and my local machine is recording. Actually, let's go back to slide 10 where we have the front end and back end. So sorry, I'm paranoid. Can I get a mic check? Okay, thank you. Sorry, the silence is just uh, makes me paranoid. Okay, so on the front end, we have the browser, and that pretty much dictates what we can use in terms of technology. And so I think someone has a hot mic, just unless, yeah. Okay, yeah, take care of that question a little bit later. So in the front end, the browser, there's a standard. All browsers try to be following the standard specs. And then all browsers support HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So we're kind of like, we don't have a choice. We have to, if we want to do anything that's displayed in the browser, it has to be HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But once we get to the back end, so in the kitchen, like I guess the front end, like all your customers at a restaurant expect a table, utensils, plates, chairs, right? You kind of fix. But in the kitchen, you it's up to you. You can have an oven, you can have a grill, you can have a brick piece oven or whatever. So the back end we have more choices. So that's what we're gonna focus on now is kind of lay out the choices that were available and the choice that we chose or I chose and why it was chosen. So if there's no questions, comments, concerns about that, I'm gonna jump to the slide 13 here. Okay. Text. Okay, so on the back end, basically is a server. The back end, we have our server, so it's no different than the machine that you're using right now, your development machine, your host machine. And on the server, you can basically install anything, any language, uh, any programming language that's available that you can install on your host. Um, the server is no different than your host, right? So there's Python, there's Ruby. You can even do things in C and C++. Oh yeah, let's not forget Java. Um, and then there's also Node.js, which is more or less JavaScript. So JavaScript can run on your browser, uh, but some people decide like, hey, why not just make that JavaScript syntax into a real programming language that works outside of the browser and on a server or machine anywhere. So there's a lot of options, or even PHP. Um, I decided to go with Python um, because of its sub, mm, it has many libraries that support data analytics and, and web development. So it just made things easier to choose Python because it has so many libraries for it. Uh, Ruby has lots of web development libraries, but not much um, data analytics libraries. Uh, Java is ha, you know has been used by enterprise, so lots of big corporations have used it, um, but is catching up to what but its web development libraries are catching up to what's available to in in Python and Ruby. And C is great for um, low resource embedded devices, but for servers, um, we can make use of let's see, but for servers, we're not constrained. The servers are not resource constrained. So why optimize for speed and like memory and such, right? Uh, so then JavaScript, um, I say it not quite as much data analytics libraries as Python. Though it is growing, but it's not quite there. And then PHP is kind of just outdated, and most PHP applications tend to get uh, to a spaghetti code kind of scenario uh, pretty quickly. And of course, it doesn't have the data analytics libraries. So that's kind of why we chose Python. It's easy. You don't have to worry about memory like C. There's a lot of libraries you can leverage. Um, and it supports data analytics and web pretty well. So that's why we chose Python. Uh, so backend language. Any questions, comments, concerns about that? Okay. So let's talk about backend uh, frameworks. Um, yeah, we'll just go over this since some of you are already in Django. Um, so each language has kind of their own framework to help build a web app. um, and then Node, right? I think. So Django is one for Python. Um, Flask is a called a micro framework. Um, I guess I can think of it as a real oven. Django is like a real oven, and Flask might be what you call an easy bake oven, if you remember that kind of toy. Um, it's just it's more lightweight. So uh, I don't know. I don't really keep up with how to secure a web app, so I just feel more comfortable leveraging what Django has, and it just feels like there's more stuff that it does for you than a Flask, like a micro framework. And then Ruby has Rails, and I think it also has um, a micro framework called Sinatra. And then Java has Spring and Spring Boot. So Spring Boot takes more of the recent developments in Python and Django and incorporates it into Spring. So whenever I have a Java app, I tend to use Spring Boot over Spring. Node.js has Express, JS, PHP has Cake, PHP. I don't know if you consider WordPress. Um, I think Drupal and some other ones. There's a ton. It's been around for a while. And then C, I don't even remember the name of it. Um, but if you're a diehard C person, it is there. I've seen one person use it. I never really touched it. So there's frameworks for every language, and we chose Django over Flask. Well, because we chose Python, then we have the option of Django or Flask. And rather than learning a micro framework, I just chose the um, normal framework, a full-fledged web framework. So I want to draw a picture of what a framework is, but it's not showing up on my iPad. Okay, there it is. So let's talk about what a framework is. Um, so say you're building a house. If you have a framework, the house would be just a basic structure that every house, every square-shaped house might have. And rather than think about how to build this square-shaped structure each and every time, a framework kind of just says it's the same thing for a framework. Um, like all web apps are gonna need certain things, and these frameworks just provide those key elements, these key core elements for you, and you just decide on the little details that's specific to your application. So if we're going with the house analogy and someone's building two houses, maybe one house they decide to put the door on one side, and another house they decide to put the door on the other side, and then also swapping the windows. But the structure is the same. You're gonna need like the 2x8s and 2x4s, the foundation, the roof. So those things are all needed for all houses, and they shared a common framework or blueprint for those common structures. Then it just eased the development of the house. So similarly for a web application, you're going to need to understand HTTP requests, and you're going to need to talk to the database. So all those core things is so common that people just built these frameworks to kind of expedite that process. And then so when we use a framework like Django, we just need to choose, okay, what is it that we want to store in the database, and what is the page going to look like, similar to how we chose the location of the door in the window. So that's, in a nutshell, a framework, and those were the frameworks available based on the programming language, and that's kind of why we ended up with Python and Django. Any questions, comments, or concerns about that? All right, so I'll stop the video here. 1, 2.